What's up, everybody? This is Case Study QB, and I am here with the one and only Kshama Sawant. And people in my audience, probably she doesn't need any introduction, but she's currently the socialist on the Seattle. She's a councilwoman on the Seattle City Board. And thank you for coming. I have so many questions to ask, and I think this is going to be an interesting show. And thank you, Kshama. Say what's up to the people, and how are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Case, for having me. And by the way, I meant to tell you, I love your title music.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm here rocking my Working Strike Back t-shirt that I got from the New York City event that happened a couple months ago. So, and I want to give a notice to anybody who is watching. If you get your shirt from the website, I believe, I got it in person. So if you get your shirt, you're supporting Working Strike Back.
Yeah, you can go to Workers Strike Back, all one word, workerstrikeback.org, and get a t-shirt.
Get a t-shirt. Let me see if I can share it right here. Boom. There it is. Workers Strike Back. And it's probably underneath one of these places somewhere. But basically, what I want to tell my audience is if you take a picture of yourself with a t-shirt, I will post it on my Twitter account. So get a t-shirt, take a picture, send it to kstudyqb@gmail.com. And I will post you on my Twitter account. So let's get straight to it with the question. So the first question I want to ask Kshama is, what's the latest news with Workers Strike Back?
Well, Workers Strike Back, as you know, has been in active solidarity with the campaign for unionizing the Amazon Air Hub at the Northern Kentucky Cincinnati Airport. It's called the KCBG Air Hub. This is the most important union drive in the country. This is the largest air hub that Amazon has in the entire world, and it is already is, and it's growing to be. That's their plan. The executive's plan is to make this the sort of the strategic central point of their plan for making one-day delivery happen. So in fact, the corporate executives in Amazon, they call it the Death Star, because that's how crucial this air hub is. So you can imagine that when you have such a linchpin of the boss's profits, that also implies that it is the most strategic organizing position for workers, because it gives you social power. Anytime workers in such a crucial situation can go on strike and shut down the profit machine, that is what gives workers leverage. And so that's why this KCBG union drive is so crucial, because if this union drive succeeds and the workers and the organizing committee there understand that it's going to be a fight, there's brutal union busting, but if they can win the union and then very likely have to go on strike to win the first contract, all of this will really bring the labor movement to a head and the clash with the bosses. But if you can win something, it's going to be big. And similarly, Workers Strike Back is also helping in solidarity with the UPS workers, the Teamsters, who are right now looking at the tentative agreement that has been brought forward and deciding whether they want to vote yes or no. Workers Strike Back, Socialist Alternative, my organization, and I personally, my office, we are calling for a no vote, because we've heard from many of the workers that the contract is not good enough. I mean, there's some gains have been made, but it is far from what can be possible, far from what the UPS bosses can afford. And last but not least, Workers Strike Back is going to be launching our video broadcast called On Strike. So, Case, please keep a lookout for that. And we, of course, want to have you on when we go live, at some point soon.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good. And I'm gonna ask you about the state of independent media later on in the show. But since we were talking about the Amazon labor union, I want to bring up this quick clip. Let me see if I can show it here. Boom. And this is basically talking about how Amazon is raking in blowout profits, quote unquote, blowout profits.
On the
I clipped this today, this
morning. Behemoth then managing to beat on the top and the bottom line, then positive numbers when it comes to their earnings picture, even saying that they look to AI in the future as being a key part.
I'm sorry, I started a little bit too early. Let me put it right here.
Corporations here, right? Let's start off with Amazon, the e-commerce behemoth, then managing to beat on the top and the bottom line, then positive numbers when it comes to their earnings picture, even saying that they look to AI in the future as being a key part of the business plan.
Yes, it was. That's all we need. It says here, Amazon reports blowout profit, and then you heard the man talking about how Amazon is going to be looking to incorporate artificial intelligence. So of course, Kshama, that's a lot more jobs that's going to be taken away, right?
Yeah, and this really shows you how the problem in society is not technology per se. The problem is capitalism. The problem is the system that we live in, and it's a system where very few people at the top, a few billionaires, multimillionaires, in fact maybe even people who own together, a few people own many trillions of dollars. They get to decide how the resources of society should be deployed. And so rather than having technology being deployed to address the problems of society, developing high speed mass transit throughout the nation so that we can massively cut down on fossil fuel use, make a real shift towards clean energy. None of this is happening. Instead, they're using technology to eliminate and minimize at least the labor costs that they face. And so this shows that workers have to keep fighting back. And so it's really important in this context case for everybody to know that actually, as we speak, yesterday and today, a very important thing is being done by Amazon warehouse workers in England, in the United Kingdom, where over 1,000 workers from 2 Amazon sites are walking out over 4 days in Coventry. And this is because that's exactly, I mean, they're saying that the corporation, the executives, the billionaires, they're making blowout profits, and the workers are not even seeing crumbs from those profits. And that's why it's important that these workers are walking out, and everything that they do and that they can win there will then come and help workers at KCVG, for example, and Amazon workers as a whole in the United States.
Yeah, 100%. Like even going back to the tentative agreement that UPS is having, I think that when I did my workshop for the Revolutionary Blackout Network this past Saturday, for those who haven't seen it, definitely go check it out on their channel. And I went through a whole bunch of lists on union strategies. I saw that the Wildcat strategy was the most effective. Like the last time that happened was the post office in like 1970. Richard Nixon was the president, and I saw that they got the most gains and increases of their salary with that Wildcat strike, which is for those who don't know what a Wildcat strike is basically an unsanctioned strike that is done without the permission of even the union leadership. So the union leadership would try to prevent a strike from happening, and from the grassroots of that union, they'll say, you know what, we are going to withhold our labor. And I can only imagine that if UPS workers say no to this tentative agreement and put the owners and the elites in a certain position, they would have to concede more. What do you think, Kshama?
Yeah, first of all, just to have a historical point in addition to what you reported, case on Wildcat strikes. Actually, what's exciting and should be encouraging for workers today, especially young workers, is that the last Wildcat strike we had in America actually is far more recent, and that was in 2018. Remember when West Virginia teachers went on strike?
Right.
And in fact, not only was technically there in legal terms their strike was not allowed by the law in the state, because it's a right to work state. Ironically, it's a right to work. It's really right to work for less, right to work for less, right to work in bad conditions, kind of thing. So it was really important that the rank and file leaders in the different public school districts statewide, they decided to prepare this strike. And keep in mind, this was not something spontaneous. They seriously prepared for it a year in advance, maybe longer. But what's important is that they did win something. And the union leaders, the leaders of AFT, which is my union, I'm a rank and file member of the American Federation of Teachers. And this is unfortunately the role that much of labor leadership has been playing, is where they try to tamp down on rank and file action rather than actually leading the way in militant strikes. And so they made a deal with the Republican legislature at that time and came to the teachers and said, here, we have won this. This is a victory. Now go back to work. The teachers refused those back to work orders from the union leadership
Mm.
and continued the strike. And that became a wildcat strike because it was without the
Mm.
sanction of the union leadership. And that was very crucial, because one of the most important points that the rank and file teachers made was that we are not going to allow divide and conquer, which was part of the deal that was being offered by the Republicans,
Mm.
is that teachers can get these really significant raises, but the other public school union and other staff were going to be left behind. Teachers said no,
Mm.
we are going to stand together, we are going to continue
Mm.
the strike. That was an incredibly courageous decision on their part. That's not a small
Yeah.
thing. We have to commend them for taking that decision, because every time we do the right thing in labor, that sets the history for the next actions. So every
Mm.
time we do it, we have to remember that it's important to be principled and courageous and also strategic, uh, for what we're going to win at that moment, but it's also for what comes afterwards. So that's why it's so all important, and that's why Worker Strike Back is also standing with, and I am standing with, UPS, Teamster, rank and file, who are saying that we have to vote no on this contract. And it's a question of keeping all the numbers in focus. UPS is a giant corporation which accounts for 6% of the GDP. They made $13 billion in profit, over $100 billion revenue last year, and that's aside from the $10 billion of stock giveaways that they gave to their major shareholders. And this company said we can't offer anything more other than what they have offered in the tentative agreement. And so I don't actually agree with the Teamster leadership, unfortunately, that has said that, well, this is a historic victory. I mean, a lot of the Teamster rank and file have told me personally, this is not the historic gains that we should be getting. In fact, it's important that the current Teamster leadership, the Sean O'Brien leadership, because of the fight back from the rank and file, and many years ago, they were able to defeat the corrupt Hoffa leadership. It's important that they have been here, and this tentative agreement is better because of the rank and file fight back, but it is insufficient to meet the needs of the UPS workers, especially with this record cost of living crisis that workers are facing, and in the context of the eye-popping profits that the bosses have made. So what the workers who are fighting for a vote no, what they are saying is that we as Teamsters should be fighting for all that we can get, and so we need to escalate the fight. And I would urge the Teamster leadership to organize nationwide, regional, and local meetings where the rank and file members can come and discuss the contract, the details of the contract all together. They can debate and discuss, and then based on that, make a truly informed decision. I think every union leadership should have the confidence in the working class, in their membership, to do this, because if you are being true to the membership, then there's nothing to fear. And if workers want to fight for more, then that's exactly that should happen. In fact, we are also urging through Worker Strike Back that the leadership keep the practice pickets open. Let's not end the practice pickets.
Mm.
Let's organize rank and file meetings, and let's make sure that we understand what's actually in the contract. And if you want, I can get into that as well.
100%. I saw, and that's something that I want to check out, because as I was doing research for this interview, I saw someone else had a video of going through the contract, and it was like 30 minutes. So I'm sure it could take a lot of time. So we're going to move on. But I want to give a shout out to the chat real quick. Miguel H, the Jaman, John Kemper, Falsificationism, Holly, PJ Holly is in the building, Paul Patrick. And I'm going to also bring up this question from the chat. Marco Padilla asked, and this is my buddy, what does Kshama think about using union worker co-ops to strengthen the unions, pushing capitalist business out of the union, and using the profits for the co-ops to fund the organization?
You want me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
That's a very good question. And yes, there have been examples throughout history about workers taking the businesses away from the capitalist bosses and then running it as workers, and that's extremely important. And every time that happens, we should strongly support this. We should because it offers a glimpse of what is possible under what I call socialism, which is an economy that is democratically controlled by workers and run in the interests of workers, humanity, and the planet. The one thing that we have to remember, though, and this is the most fundamental point, we cannot build illusions in the idea that we can have individual co-op workplaces under capitalism, and that incrementally is going to lead to socialism. That is not what happens. And that will, so as I said, individual examples are important because they show that it's possible, but it is simply not not what we need, which is an economy wide shift, an international shift. And the fact is that, I'm speaking hypothetically here, if such co-ops actually started succeeding on a giant scale, then there is no way the capitalist class is just going to leave them alone. There will be war again, political class war against those examples, because the capitalists don't want workers to think, oh, okay, this can be the new model for society. So in other words, what I'm saying is that all of this is great, but none of that is a substitute for actual political struggle, political war to change society. And that requires workers to get organized on a giant scale, on a titanic scale, and have actions like the 1930s general strikes in various cities, including Minneapolis, where it was those kinds of massive battles that forced concessions from the ruling class. And then, furthermore, beyond that, we will need revolutionary struggle. I'll just leave you with one other point. Right here in Seattle, there is a nonprofit co-op called PCC Grocery Stores, and you can see how it started with genuine understanding, genuine ideas about worker ownership and community ownership, and I strongly support all of that. But what's happened over the years is that a very corporatized leadership has taken over this grocery store. It's a chain of grocery stores in Washington and Oregon, and the workers there who are unionized with UFCW 3000, they've been actually fighting for a decent contract. And you should see how much pushback they're getting from management. I mean, they're barely making enough to pay rent. Some of them are actually even unhoused. They're living in their cars, and the executives of this grocery store, they are making millions of dollars. And so all of this shows that they are actually they are having to fight back. So in fact, inside UFCW 3000, some of the lead PCC rank and file workers have launched a left caucus called PCC Workers United, which is very important. But you can see that they're getting pushback not only from management, but they're having to push back against the union leadership's reluctance to take on a fighting strategy as well. So workers need to get organized on a militant fighting basis.
Definitely sounds good. Quick shout out to James Bletcher and Rizal the Great. So I want to talk to you about Seattle politics. And with that said, we know that you will not be running again, and there are people who are going to be running to replace you. So let me show this clip of that happening, and we're going to discuss some Seattle politics.
The primary election in Washington, it is coming up on Tuesday. People in Seattle will be voting on who they want to represent their district on city council.
Out of the 7 seats, 4 of them are left open by council members who are not seeking re-election. And one of those open seats is in District 3, where 9 people are running to replace Kshama Sawant. King 5's Connor Board is in the newsroom tonight with more on this race.
All right, so this is a list of some of the 9 people. They're going to be 4 out of 7 Seattle seats that are going to be open, which is interesting. That could be potentially an opportunity for a big shift in politics. And I'm going to ask you later what you would do if you had a socialist majority on as somebody that was a socialist as mayor, and also a socialist majority on a city council, what policies you would like to pursue. But let's focus on somebody that potentially can replace you. So I'm going to go forward to someone that I know we want to definitely chat about that potentially is in the lead or could potentially win.
He would be in favor of aligning city law with state law to allow the Seattle City prosecutor to prosecute public drug use cases.
It's very cruel and inhumane for us to be watching that happen, and the poisons that are happening right now.
I'm sorry, let me put it back just a little bit because I want them to introduce her.
We can address our growth and start bending the curve cost on how much it costs to build housing.
When it comes to the issue of public drug use, Hollingsworth said she would be in favor of aligning city law with state law to allow the Seattle City prosecutor to prosecute public drug use cases.
It's very cruel and inhumane for us to be watching that happen, and the poisons that are happening right here in front of our eyes. We have to do something. We can't let this go any further.
Hudson says she does not believe we have enough information to allow the city prosecutor to prosecute public drug use at this point.
All right, I'm going to stop it here to give the mic to Kshama to discuss this race and who potentially can replace her.
Yeah, I mean, overall, not surprisingly, case the city council is headed in a very conservative and a pro Chamber of Commerce, and I would say what's really business as usual under capitalism, since not only have some somewhat progressive Democrats decided not to run, but for most importantly is because this shift is happening because our office won't be in City Hall, and it really shows you the dramatic nature of political shifts that happen when even one actual fighter can get elected to office. You know, we have it's this is my 10th year in office. I've always been just one socialist in on the city council. All the 8 other positions have always been Democrats, and about half of them have always been conservative, very openly pro big business Democrats. And yet, look at the victories we have won. We won the $15 minimum wage in 2014. Seattle became the first major city to win that at that time. Then we won the Amazon tax, which at this moment is raising almost $300 billion for affordable housing, and $300 million for affordable housing, which is not enough, but it is a huge chunk of money because it is taxing the wealthiest businesses like Amazon. And we have won a whole series of renters' rights that were thought of as unwinnable. And we have won 4 elections. Despite everything thrown against us, we are going to be leaving City Hall undefeated. And so it shows you that even with one office, if you have a strong political analysis, if you have strong organizing, if the working class has its own political organizations like Socialist Alternative, you know, as I am part of Socialist Alternative, then you can move mountains. And then when you don't have that, how immediately capitalism reverts to what I call business as usual. And so that's what's happening in City Hall. And it's really striking. The clips you played are important because we just had the primary this past Tuesday, and Joy Hollingsworth is the lead. The 2 have advanced to the general election, and the 2 who have advanced is the 2 people you played. And Joy Hollingsworth, the black candidate, she's the leading candidate, and she is going to win. Joy Hollingsworth is going to win, very likely, because she is very much ahead, and she has the support of the Seattle Times, which is extremely reactionary. She has the support of the Chamber of Commerce, which represents some of the wealthiest people and some of the most reactionary elements in our city. But what's happening here, and this is where we want to be clear, is that she's black, she's a woman, and she is going to play identity politics for all it's worth to try and mislead voters into thinking, especially black working class people, into thinking that, this woman represents us. But in reality, she represents interests that are deeply, deeply hostile to black class and low income people, and to the working class and low income community as a whole. Because this is the Chamber of Commerce. They were against $15 an hour. They were viciously against the Amazon tax. They were very much, all these big businesses, Jeff Bezos, billionaires from Starbucks and Amazon, they were all, and corporate landlords, they have always been against us. They have poured millions of dollars to try and defeat me. These are the forces behind her, and these are the same forces, as I said, that have been hostile to any progressive agenda. And these are also the people who were opposed to the rent control measure that I had been fighting for, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. And so it's really important for us. What's the most important lesson here is that identity politics should be rejected. working class solidarity is what's important. And in fact, if we want to win gains for the most marginalized people, including Black and Indigenous people of color, low income and poor people, then that's precisely why we should not buy into this very really poisonous identity politics. And just one last thing, she was talking about what she was, it's really misleading the way she was saying. If you just listen to her words and didn't really understand what she was saying, it sounded like she's full of compassion towards people who are facing addiction issues. But in reality, the bill that she's supporting is something that we actually defeated just recently. Just a couple of months ago, we defeated that because ordinary people organized and because my office really made it clear. And just having one elected office that is opposing these policies matters. It can really shift things. And so we defeated this bill, which is really to prosecute people with minor drug possession. It is trying to restart a war on drugs in Seattle. And we know how the war on drugs went the last time around, right, Case?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
how did that affect working class people, especially Black working
people.
class and poor people? So this is deeply insidious. And anybody who's watching this who's in Seattle should know that this person is far from being on the side of the Black community.
I just want to do a quick case study, right in real time, as Kshama was gave us her opinion of this person. Let me show you what they were talking about, or how they introduced her.
Alex Hudson are three of the candidates hoping to represent District 3 on Seattle City Council. Joy Hollingsworth has lived in the district her whole life and has worked with nonprofits focused on food insecurity and worked in the cannabis and hemp industries. She says her top two priorities are affordable housing and public safety.
It's our police staffing, ensuring that we have a fully staffed police department, our fire, our EMT, and also ensuring that we have the right response to the right situation with our healthcare workers, our social workers, our mental health providers, our gun violence prevention.
Cooley has...
See, she sounds like such a nice person, and that's how they paint her, as such a nice person, but we just got the real rundown, the real reality. And what if Seattle had, that was probably their public, local station. What if Seattle had a socialist-centric type of station that workers can go to for their news? They would get the narrative that Kshama gave, and she probably would not be the front runner in this case. So we're going to talk about the rent control now. I'm going to show a quick clip from the results of that race.
And called for capping maximum. Was introduced by Councilmember Kshama Sawant and called for capping maximum rate increases based on the rate of inflation. Her bill says rent prices increased 69% between 2010 and 2018, while wages in Seattle only jumped 20% during that time. Opponents, including landlords, say rent control is a government overreach that also hampers the creation of new housing, which reduces affordable housing for renters in the long term. Even if the legislation had passed, it would not have been able to go into effect until a state ban is lifted. There's been a statewide ban on rent control since the 80s.
All right, so let me bring back in Kshama, and then when you can tell me when you want me to show the clip that you sent me, but you can talk about the results of this recent vote.
Yeah, first of all, just some of the people who have written, I agree that one red flag, that one small nugget of honesty in what Joy Hollingsworth was saying there. She said we need more police staffing. That one part was a giveaway that she is pro-police, which means, anybody, sometimes when somebody says they're pro-police staffing, that means that they are against Black Lives Matter, against people who are fighting for racial justice, especially in the connection with the police department. And when they say public safety, that they mean more policing and more crackdown, not only continuing the status quo of racism that's coming from the police department, but also attacks against homeless people, carrying out sweeps where homeless neighbors are just shunted from one part of the city to another, but no affordable housing is provided. And when she says, I am for affordable housing, what the hell does that mean? I mean, how are you going to fund affordable housing? And this connects to the issue of rent control as well, because, one of the things that was said in the news clip you just played was that corporate landlords are against rent control because they don't say corporate, but I'm saying corporate because that's who is really opposing rent control. Corporate landlords say rent control will be devastating for the growth of housing, for the building and construction industries, and so on. There is no truth in this. There's no statistical evidence to prove that. In fact, the statistical evidence proves the exact opposite. Just one example I'll give you is that at a time when New York City had, in the post-World War II era, when they had the strictest rent control laws in place, was when they had their two biggest construction booms. So there is no truth in this. In fact, it is, to me as an economist, it's reminiscent of when businesses, when we were fighting for $15 an hour minimum wage, they said, oh, it'll be nothing short of an apocalypse in Seattle. If you increase the minimum wage to 15, all the businesses going to shut down. There is zero evidence case that that businesses shut down because of minimum wage increase. And of course, what we said at that time was that if capitalism is such a fragile system that simply giving above poverty wages to the workers who make the profits possible is going to make the system collapse, then what are we even defending the system for? We need a different kind of society altogether, which I, of course, strongly believe in. But my point is that none of the fear mongering that they engage in has any basis in reality. And as a matter of fact, the other piece of reality here is that as we speak in Seattle, there is an over 6% vacancy rate, and which means that more than 11,000 rental apartments are actually vacant right now, today, in this city. That is more than the number of people who go to sleep on the streets, homeless, unsheltered, every night. So actually, the problem is not the amount of housing that is built. The problem is how much of that is actually affordable, that's accessible to ordinary people. And of course, the most dire problems are being faced by the most vulnerable people, who have been in financial crisis and they've been made homeless. But most of the people who are housed right now, the people who are renters, which is the majority of the city, they are barely hanging on by their nails because rent is so expensive that they're paying 50-60% of their income in rent, and they're having to move multiple times a year. Most young people I know, they live in group houses because they can't afford their own place. So housing is in a very dire situation, and that's why we were fighting for rent control. And if you wanted to play that clip, then I can talk about what happened.
Sure.
We don't get it! Shut it down! We don't get it! Shut it down! And if we don't get it, shut it down!
Councilmember Lewis calls himself a progressive and Labor Democrat, yet he outrageously voted no in the Renters' Rights Committee. If he votes no today again, then rank and file workers should be asking, seriously, what does it even mean to say, Councilmember Lewis, that you support labor? Do you have any accountability at all to working people who are barely getting by? Councilmember Mosqueda calls herself a progressive and a Labor Democrat, yet she could not bother to show up for a vote that is of so much consequence to so many who are vulnerable. Yes, we understand scheduling conflicts happen, but to quote workers' strike back activist Sasha Sommer, who just said, come on, our homeless neighbors are dying and more people are getting evicted or facing housing stability. All a council member needed to do was to call in over Zoom for a few minutes. This shows the priorities. What was a priority for Councilmember Mosqueda? It was leading the way in repealing the pandemic hazard pay for grocery workers.
Yeah, it is a moral fucking imperative that they vote for that.
All right, it's a family show, so we're going to keep it moving. But before you jump in, Kshama, I want to just put emphasis on and tell the audience, these are people Kshama has to work with. These are people that she sees in the office, and she's calling out their name. These are supposed allies who are supposed to be democratic socialists and things of that nature, and she's calling them out by name. Imagine if we had strong House of Representative leaders, strong senators who are calling out the names of their fellow colleague and not having decorum like the media likes to promote and like they like to promote on the Hill, this decorum. If we were calling out people's names and going on different media outlets and pushing it for it, which that's what they're looking for. I remember Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club, who's famous for doing different interviews. He was saying, why don't they call out Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema? Why don't the Democrats call them out themselves? But go ahead, Kshama.
Yeah, absolutely. It was important to play that part of the clip, especially because of exactly the reason you're saying, which is that what we don't have, and this is the hardest thing, and we've seen this play out with the squad, especially with AOC. Even when people get elected with good intentions, and let's presume they got elected with good intentions. We don't even have to speculate otherwise. The most important thing is what happens after that. So even when you get elected with good intentions, if you are not willing to fight in the way that we have used our office to fight, then it comes to naught. And this is what AOC means when she says, that, she was saying, she was called out correctly by ordinary people, by working people, and union members, when people saw the MAGA, the, ultra MAGA Freedom Caucus type of Congress members using force the vote to get what they want during the election for the vote for the speakership. And at that time she was asked, why didn't the left do the kind of force a vote for Medicare for all and $15 an hour? And she, in again, one small nugget of honesty in all the word salad she gave, was that it would have done relationship harm. And that is actually the crux of the matter, that if you get elected as supposedly as a fighter for the working class, then you should you cannot look at that as a normal job. Like, it's not like you're an Amazon warehouse worker. See, if you're a regular worker, in the working class, and you go to work, then what's paramount is that you build solidarity with your coworkers, because you have shared grievances, a shared situation of exploitative working conditions, low wages, and the boss is making profits off your backs. But when you get elected as a fighter for the working class, that is the exact opposite. So when I go to work in City Hall, the Democrats who are selling out the workers that I am standing up for, they are not my friends. They are not my colleagues. They are representing the interests of the elite, whose interests are diametrically opposed to the needs of the people I'm fighting for. So by virtue of that logic, they are not on my side. And so it is my political and moral duty to call them out by name, because unless I do that, it does not provide the political clarity that needs to be brought out, that these people are not on your side. And so, and the reality here is that on the city council, the most conservative and openly pro big business Democrats, they are not the ones that working people have illusions in. Working people have illusions in the people, the kind that I called out. Councilmember Andrew Lewis, he goes around calling himself a Labor Democrat. Now, more recently, he's calling himself a progressive and Labor Democrat. What do these labels mean? He was going to vote for that war on drugs bill, by the way. We forced him to reverse his vote, and his wealthy benefactors are angry with him right now. And so he tried to make up for that by voting no on rent control. So this is what I mean. When you get these so-called progressive Democrats, they speak from both sides of their mouth. Teresa Mosqueda, she claims to be a big-time Labor Democrat. She's the most prominent leader in the Democratic Party in Seattle. She's very powerful. She, as was said in that video clip, she led the charge in repealing the hard-won pandemic hazard pay for grocery workers. And those there was a clip of them marching. That comes full circle to my earlier point. Those are the workers at the PCC co-op. Those are the grocery workers. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Their
Okay, I remember.
Their whole fight back actually case. I mean, they've been unhappy about their inadequate wages and benefits and the understaffing situation, but their real their starting point in their fight back when they formed this left caucus was fighting against the repeal of the hazard pay. They had won $4 an hour hazard pay during the pandemic, and Teresa Mosqueda, the Labor Democrat, she led the charge in repealing that, which is completely shameful. And then when we had the rent control vote this past Tuesday, she didn't even bother to show up, even though she can just call in on Zoom and vote.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing. But with the 4 minutes we have left, I had so many other questions I wanted to talk to you about, other progressive policies like 4-day work week, boss to employee ratio, a 25 paid vacation days. Should it be lower? Should it be lower? Maybe how much high it should be, because a lot of different countries have a lot of paid vacation days. I want to talk about salting and peppering strategies. But we'll talk about that on another stream. The last question I want to ask you is about the state of left media, and what do you think of independent left media, and how, as somebody who watches a lot of mainstream media, as most people know, and I watch a lot of independent media, I would have thought to see you on a lot of other places a lot more. So, for example, I'll say straight up, TYT, I would thought that as a leftist, someone who's a progressive in that lane and a strong voice, and someone who was elected. So it's not even like you're a nobody. You are somebody who has a big voice. I thought I would see you there way more than what I actually see, what is actual reality. So let me give you the microphone as we close out the show.
Yeah, maybe that's why they don't want me on, because they know that we have a lot to say and that we have a very powerful analysis that will make sense to a lot of working people. And so just to clarify, I will go on TYT if they have me on. I have gone on Fox News, CNN, all kinds of media, because I know that when I go on there, I'm not speaking to the person who is interviewing me. I'm speaking to the hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of people who are listening, many of whom will agree with what I'm saying. So when I go on Fox News, I think of the Teamster rank and file, the Teamster drivers who are driving their trucks, FedEx drivers who are driving their trucks and listening to radio as they're driving. And I know that some of the things that I say will resonate with them about the injustice that workers face, about the strong contracts that we want to fight for, and the need to go on strike in the union movement. And so in this context, the left media, as much as we have, and in fact, we have too little of it, it plays a pivotal role. So the fact that you have this broadcast where we can have this conversation about workers need to go on strike, what's happening with the question of rent control, all of this is so crucial, because the New York Times is not calling me for an interview on why the Democrats voted down rent control. They are not having me on to talk about West Virginia teacher strike, or why the UPS, many of the UPS Teamsters are planning to vote no. So the left media plays a very crucial role. And in fact, as I said, I have deep appreciation for shows like yours, RBN, many other shows, and I've been on many of your shows. But it's precisely because of all of that Workers Strike Back is launching, as I said, a new video broadcast called On Strike, and we're hoping to continue collaborating with you and others. And we need, and what we are going to bring through On Strike is some of the analysis that we have brought forward through our office, but we're hoping that will be the platform for us to have more in-depth discussions, including historical discussions, because historic discussions of history and analysis is not it's not an armchair thing. It's not an intellectual satisfaction kind of thing, just for the heck of it. It's because we want to learn lessons. We want to understand, if there was a general strike in Minneapolis and San Francisco, how did that happen? What did the workers do? Why is it that every time you see these massive strike actions, virtually every time there's socialist leadership there? So what does socialism mean? Why was the Russian Revolution the most progressive event in 20th century human history? So all of those questions we want to discuss, and at the same time also provide analysis for the most pivotal daily events like the UPS contract, but also internationally.
Awesome. That was very articulated very well. And the very last question, I promise this last question, I want to ask you about the policy of a 4-day work week.
Yeah, I mean, Workers Strike Back, our main demands, of course, are $25 an hour at least for workers, Medicare for all, a fight against discrimination and oppression, and that all workers need a union, and that we need a new party for working people. But that doesn't mean that we also don't support other progressive measures, of course. So in other words, my approach as a socialist, and so the approach of Socialist Alternative and of many in Workers Strike Back, is going to be that if there is momentum to win progressive demands like a 4-day work week, then absolutely we should do it. I mean, one of the reasons when we ran our first city council campaign in 2013, the reason we made $15 an hour minimum wage as the flagship, the primary demand, is not because we didn't think other things were also needed, but because that was where the momentum was, that was where the consciousness was shifting. So in other words, we need to win so much under capitalism, right? We're spoiled for choice in that sense. If capitalism gives us so much, we have to win because it's such a crappy system. It screws us over. And so we could have picked many things, but it's important to organize around demands where we feel there is real momentum, that workers are willing to fight for this right now. So let's go for it and win. So in that sense, we will support demands like 4-day work week. But it's interesting that you're asking me about this today, because this morning when I was looking at the news, I just saw something that made me chuckle, which is Mike Hopkins, the senior vice president of Amazon Prime and Videos, said famously in an internal meeting, apparently, where these corporations, corporate executives are trying to force tech workers and other workers back to what they call return to office, like back to work in the office, because they don't see, workers are working remotely since the pandemic. But the bosses, see, this is really revealing about capitalism, because not only do the bosses want you to work, they don't like it when they don't have full control over you, because if they don't have control over you, then God forbid, they're going to get uppity ideas about maybe we should have a union, maybe our conditions should be better, maybe we should demand more. Look how much our life, standard of living, quality of life has improved because we are able to work remotely. We are able to spend more time with our families. Maybe we'll start talking about a 4-day work week, So the reason the bosses under capitalism push back against even something small like this as not letting you work from home is because they know that if they give an inch, then you will take a mile, which we should. It's our moral and political duty to take that mile. But the point is that that's how hard they will fight. So the reason this was so funny to me is that this guy, Mike Hopkins, the senior VP of Amazon Prime, apparently he said in an internal meeting, you guys got to return to office. And then he says, this is a quote, "I don't have data to back it up, but I know it's better."
Oh, wow. Wow. I know.
Even he doesn't have data to back up his claim that workers should go back to work, but still you should do it.
You should still do it, because I don't know what it is about the elites, the bosses, how, like, well, you just articulated, they just have that innate subconscious feeling like, I gotta have control. Gotta have control over these people. And I know in my own, I work IT, I would love to work remote. And during the pandemic, I did work remote, and it was such a better experience not having to travel an hour and a half to work on a train, walking a half an hour to my job and walk. That's 3 hours I get back in my life. They're worried. What are you going to do with that 3 hours? Are you going to watch the news? Go ahead.
They're worried about what you'll do in those 3 hours. And they're worried that now that you got those 3 hours back, then you'll start thinking about winning more.
Exactly.
So they are very clear about what's at stake. So likewise, we have to be clear about what's at stake. So it's really important that tech workers and other workers, even in the insurance industry, actually, they were saying, maybe we should form unions because they don't want to be forced back to work. I mean, back to the office. I mean, they're still working, but they're working remotely. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all the tech workers and other workers who are fighting back against the forced return to office. Good for you. We stand with you. And in fact, let's combine this with other demands as well related to working conditions, to pay and benefits, and also unionizing. And I just wanted to say one last thing. One of the workers who responded to this guy, Mike Hopkins, who said, I don't have data to back it up, but I know it's better. This worker wrote on an internal Slack channel, he said, "What embarrassingly poor leadership."
Wow.
That the ruling class, they act like these billionaires. They just have high IQ. They're so talented. They're so innovative. And sure, there may be all of that. But at the same time, it shows how under capitalism, everything is so not only unjust, but completely absurd, So we need a different kind of society.
No, 100%. There was a recent clip that went viral, or one of the clips that I clipped on Case Study QB on my Twitter account was a MSNBC clip of a guy discussing Cornel West being a threat to and black voters potentially voting for him. And he said, how, and I quote, "How can the Democratic Party get them back in line?" As if the Democrats have a hold of black voters. And it just goes right in line with what you're talking about, of how these elite and bosses and these people at these high levels thinking about the workers, the working class.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
with that said, I want to thank you so much, Kshama Sawant. Hold on the line. I'm just going to end the show real quick. And I want to shout out Off the Rails, Russia Gators, Marco, Paul Patrick, John Kemper, PJ Holly, Gabriel, and everybody else, too many to name at this point. Purple Philosophy, thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate it. Share it. And one last thing I want to say one more time. If you buy a Workers Strike Back t-shirt, email it to KStudyQB, and I will post it on my Twitter account. Solidarity with you all. Everyone have a great one. Adios.